A former Navy SEAL came to a frozen mountain town to outrun memories of war. But when a blizzard lifted, it revealed something far more dangerous than the cold. Two police officers ambushed, silenced, and nearly erased for seeing the wrong thing. A hidden network, a river of ice, and a choice no soldier ever truly escapes. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, subscribe for more stories like this. Winter settled over Frosthaven, Montana, like a held breath. Before sunrise, the town existed in shades of blue and gray, its streets muffled by fresh snow, its windows glowing faintly with the promise of warmth that never quite reached the air outside. The Blackstone River cut through the edge of town, dark water sliding beneath fractured plates of ice that groaned softly as they shifted. Beyond the last row of buildings, pine-covered hills rose into a sky washed thin and pale, the kind of winter sky that made sound travel farther and silence feel heavier. This was where Liam Cross ran. He moved along the frozen river path with measured strides, boots crunching softly against packed snow. Liam was young, late 20s, tall, broad-shouldered, built with the kind of lean strength that came from constant use rather than vanity. His dark hair was cropped short, already dusted with frost, and his face carried a calm, unreadable focus. Nothing about him invited conversation. That suited him just fine. Running at his side was Rook, a full-grown male German shepherd with a thick sable and black coat and an intelligent, alert expression. The dog's movements were smooth and economical, his long stride matching Liam's pace with ease. Rook's ears flicked constantly, tracking distant sounds, while his nose sampled the air in quick, practiced pulls. This was not a casual morning jog. It was routine, structure. One of the few things Liam trusted to keep his thoughts in order. He had come to Frosthaven for quiet, for distance, for a place where the echoes of war, rotor blades, shouted commands, the sharp crack of gunfire, could finally fade into something manageable. Here, the cold was clean, honest. It asked nothing of him except endurance. Rook slowed. The change was subtle but immediate. The dog's gait shortened, muscles tightening beneath his coat. His head lowered, nose pressing closer to the snow, tail stiffening. Liam noticed at once and eased to a stop, his breath fogging in slow, controlled clouds. "What is it?" he murmured. Rook did not look back. He veered sharply off the path toward the riverbank, pulling with quiet insistence. The scent had direction and urgency. Liam hesitated only a moment before following. The riverbank sloped down toward an old steel bridge, its rusted beams rising like dark ribs against the brightening sky. Built decades earlier to serve factories long since abandoned, the bridge cast a deep shadow beneath it, even in summer. In winter, it became a hollow cavern of ice, wind, and echo. As they descended into the gully beneath the bridge, Rook's breathing changed. His hackles lifted slightly, not in aggression, but recognition. The air was wrong, metal, old oil, and beneath it, faint but unmistakable, the sharp tang of spent gunpowder, long cooled but not erased by snow. Liam's jaw tightened. The quiet he had come here to protect slipped away, replaced by something colder and far more familiar. "Easy," he whispered. Under the bridge, half buried in snow and frozen slush, lay two bodies. The first was a young man sprawled on his side, his dark police jacket torn at the shoulder. Blood had frozen along his temple, streaking into short brown hair. One arm lay bent at an angle that made Liam wince. The man's chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Beside him lay a young woman, her body curled slightly inward as if she had tried to shield herself. Her blonde hair was tangled with ice, her cheek bruised deep purple, lips cracked and pale. Raw marks circled her wrists where something hard had bitten into skin. Her uniform pants were ripped at the knee, fabric stiff with frozen blood. They were alive. Barely. Liam dropped to one knee without hesitation. He checked the man first. Pulse present, weak but steady. The injuries told a story. These were not wild blows or panic strikes. They were controlled, placed to incapacitate quickly. Whoever had done this knew exactly where to hit. He shifted to the woman, brushing snow gently from her face, feeling for breath. There it was. Thin, fragile, but still there. 2 officers, he muttered. Rook circled them slowly, nose low, tail rigid. He paused near the woman, then lifted his head and released a low, uneasy huff. Liam followed the dog's gaze up the slope toward the embankment. There, half hidden by drifting snow, sat a patrol car, or what remained of it. The windshield was shattered inward. One tire lay shredded, rubber split cleanly by something sharp. Side mirrors were gone, torn off with force. Liam approached carefully, scanning the tree line before reaching the vehicle. Inside, the glove compartment hung open, empty. The center console had been pried apart, wires exposed. The radio unit was missing, torn out completely. The data terminal was gone as well. Yet the officers' weapons were still holstered. Wallets untouched. This was not theft. Liam returned to the bodies, decision already made. He shrugged out of his outer jacket and draped it carefully over the woman, then pulled a thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it around the man. He slid his pack beneath the man's shoulders to lift him off the frozen ground, then did the same for the woman, creating a barrier between them and the ice. Hypothermia would kill faster than blood loss if he let it. Rook positioned himself slightly uphill, body angled outward, eyes tracking the river and the road above. The dog's presence was a silent warning to anything that might still be watching. Liam worked quickly, methodically, applying pressure where needed, adjusting limbs just enough to prevent further damage, keeping movements minimal. He spoke quietly, even though neither officer could hear him. Old habit. Grounding. He reached into his pack and withdrew a compact satellite communicator, its casing scarred from years of use. He moved several steps away from the patrol car before activating it. "This is Cross," he said, voice calm and clipped. "I have 2 injured law enforcement officers under the old Blackstone Bridge. Severe exposure, multiple trauma injuries. Request immediate medical response." There was a brief pause, then acknowledgement. Coordinates confirmed. Help on the way. Liam exhaled slowly. He stayed with them, monitoring breathing, watching color return in faint, uneven patches. Snow began to fall again, thicker now, soft flakes catching in Rook's fur and on Liam's sleeves. At last, he heard it. The distant wail of sirens cutting through the quiet, muffled by snowfall but growing louder. He climbed the embankment, flagged the ambulance down, then guided the medics beneath the bridge. They moved fast, practiced hands assessing injuries, securing necks, lifting bodies onto stretchers. Liam stepped back, answering questions briefly, factually, offering nothing beyond what was necessary. The ambulance doors closed with a heavy finality. Red lights flared against the gray morning, then faded as the vehicle pulled away. The sound disappeared. Silence rushed back in to fill the space. Liam remained beneath the bridge, breath slowing, shoulders heavy. Rook returned to his side, pressing his weight lightly against Liam's leg, a steady grounding presence. The river cracked softly beneath its ice. Snow began to erase footprints. His, the medics, the marks of violence that should never have been there. Liam stared at the empty ground where the officers had lain. He had come to Frosthaven to quiet the war inside his head, to run, to breathe, to disappear for a while. But some things did not allow you to walk away. Standing beneath that frozen bridge, watching the last sign of the ambulance vanish into falling snow, Liam Cross understood a truth he had spent years trying to outrun. Whatever had happened here was not finished, and neither, it seemed, was he. The first thing Evan became aware of was sound. A steady, mechanical beeping pressed against his skull, slow and patient, followed by the muted hiss of oxygen. The air smelled sharp and clean, tinged with antiseptic. When he opened his eyes, the light stabbed hard, forcing him to squint. A white ceiling swam above him, unfamiliar and too close. Hospital? The word formed sluggishly in his mind as sensation returned in fragments. Pain in his ribs, a dull ache in his shoulder, a throbbing pulse behind his left eye. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. A sharp flare shot through his side, stealing his breath. "Easy," a calm voice said nearby. "You're awake. Don't rush it." Evan turned his head slowly. A nurse stood beside the bed, middle-aged, practical, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Her expression was professional, but not unkind. She adjusted a monitor, then glanced back at him. "You were brought in early this morning," she continued. "Hypothermia, blunt force trauma. You're lucky." Lucky didn't feel like the right word. Evan swallowed and shifted his gaze to the other bed across the room. Mara lay there, still and pale, against the white sheets. Her blonde hair had been pulled back loosely, strands escaping around her bruised cheek. A bandage wrapped her forehead, and her right arm was immobilized in a sling. Even unconscious, there was a tension to her posture, as if part of her refused to fully let go. "Mara?" Evan rasped. The nurse followed his gaze. "She's stable. Woke up briefly an hour ago. Doctors are running scans." Relief washed through him, immediately followed by something heavier. Guilt, thick and suffocating. Images began to surface. Broken, jagged flashes of the night before. Snow swirling in headlights. An industrial access road skirting the edge of town. A dark truck, too large for local traffic, moving without urgency, but without lights. Evan closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe through the ache. They had been running a quiet patrol, nothing special. Just another winter shift, another night checking roads most people forgot existed once the snow set in. He had been driving. Mara sat beside him, studying the tablet, cross-checking timestamps and locations with a focus that bordered on instinct. "That truck doesn't belong here," she had said. Calm, certain. They followed at a distance, staying dark, wheels crunching softly over frozen gravel. The road curved toward the abandoned industrial zone, a place of empty warehouses and rusted fences, where the town bled into wilderness. Then everything went wrong. No shouted warnings, no threats. Just movement. Figures appeared out of the darkness with impossible speed. The windshield exploded inward. Evan remembered the sickening crack of glass, the violent jolt as something struck his door. He barely had time to register hands, gloved and precise, pulling him free. The blows came fast, controlled, placed. This wasn't a mugging. It wasn't a scare tactic. It was an extraction. Evan opened his eyes again, heart pounding. Across the room, Mara stirred. Her lashes fluttered, and she drew a shallow breath before her eyes opened fully. Gray-blue, sharp even through pain, they scanned the room in quick, efficient movements, ceiling, walls, equipment, before settling on Evan. "You're alive," she said hoarsely. "So are you," he replied. "Looks like neither of us gets out of this easy." She tried to smile. It didn't quite land. A doctor arrived soon after, a tall man in his 40s with tired eyes and a clipped manner. He explained injuries, recovery times, things that would need rest and patience. Mara listened but asked no questions, her attention clearly elsewhere. When the room finally quieted again, she spoke. "They didn't say a word," she said softly. "Did they to you?" Evan shook his head. "Nothing. Not a threat. Not a warning." Mara's jaw tightened. "That wasn't random." "No," Evan agreed. "It was clean. Too clean." Later that morning, a man appeared at the doorway. Liam Cross stood there, hands loosely clasped in front of him, posture relaxed but alert. In the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital corridor, He looked much the same as he had beneath the bridge. Tall, broad-shouldered, calm in a way that suggested he measured the world before stepping into it. His dark jacket was plain, his expression unreadable. "I'm Liam," he said simply. "I was the one who found you." Evan studied him for a moment. There was something about the man's presence that didn't fit neatly into the hospital environment. Too still, too controlled. "Thank you," Evan said. "For everything." Liam inclined his head. "You were lucky someone was running early." Mara watched him closely, her gaze sharper than Evan's. "You didn't call local dispatch?" Liam met her eyes without hesitation. "I called for medical help. That was all." A beat passed. Mara nodded slowly, as if filing the answer away rather than accepting it. They didn't ask him to stay. Liam didn't offer. He answered a few basic questions from a uniformed officer outside the room. Time, location, condition, and then stepped back into the hallway, leaving them alone again. When he was gone, Mara exhaled through her nose. "He's not from around here." "No," Evan said, "but he showed up when it mattered." Silence settled, broken only by the hum of machines. Mara stared at the ceiling, thoughts moving fast behind tired eyes. "Our route," she said at last. "It wasn't on the public schedule." Evan frowned. "You think someone tipped them off?" "I know someone did," she replied, "because this isn't the first time." She turned her head slightly, careful of the pain, and met his gaze. 3 weeks ago, I filed a report about unusual night traffic near the river access. It vanished from the system, marked as duplicate." Evan's stomach sank. "You didn't tell me that." "I wanted to be sure before I dragged you into it," she said quietly. "Now look where that got us." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, resolve hardening beneath exhaustion. "I've worked cases in 2 other states," she continued. "I did a short interagency rotation before transferring here. You learn things when you work outside one department." Evan nodded slowly. He had known bits of that, Mara's sharp instincts, her habit of double-checking everything, but not the full picture. "I don't trust a single system," she went on. "That's why I keep my own backups, encrypted, offline." Evan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "So if someone's messing with reports, they won't get everything," Mara finished. Across town, Rook paced near the window of the small cabin overlooking the river. The German shepherd's ears flicked back and forth as distant sounds drifted through the cold air. When the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of the bridge, he stopped, body tense, and released a low, unsettled growl. Liam noticed. He followed the dog's gaze toward the tree line and felt the same pull he'd felt beneath the bridge. Something there didn't sit right. Not yet. Back in the hospital room, Evan stared at his hands, fingers flexing slowly. "I was driving," he said at last. "If I'd reacted faster—" Mara cut him off. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do. This wasn't a fair fight." She paused, then lowered her voice. "Listen to me. Whatever this is, it's bigger than a couple of patrol officers crossing paths with the wrong truck." Evan met her eyes. "You think there's a leak." "I think someone knew where we'd be," she said, "and I don't know who." The words hung heavy between them. Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet and relentless, covering tracks, smoothing edges, hiding what lay beneath. And somewhere between the river and the empty warehouses, the truth waited, unfinished. The storm loosened its grip by mid-morning, not retreating so much as pausing to breathe. Frosthaven remained wrapped in cold, but the wind fell quiet, and the snowfall thinned into a drifting haze. Clouds hung low and heavy, their bellies bruised gray, promising they would return before nightfall. For now, the world held still. Liam took the opportunity. He parked his truck well away from the river road and stepped out into the cold with Rook at his side. The German shepherd moved differently today. Focused, deliberate, his nose already working the air before his paws touched the ground. Liam checked the sky once more, then followed the dog toward the riverbank. The gully beneath the steel bridge looked almost peaceful in daylight. Fresh snow had softened the hard edges of ice and frozen slush, filling in the gouges left by boots and tires. If someone had come here now without knowing what had happened, they might have seen nothing more than winter reclaiming an empty place. Rook disagreed. The dog lowered his head, inhaling deeply, then began to move with purpose. Not pulling this time, not urgent, just certain. He traced a slow arc beneath the bridge, nose skimming the surface, tail steady. Liam stayed a few steps behind, eyes scanning the embankments, the shadows between beams, the frozen river beyond. The scent line led away from where the bodies had been found, and toward the river's edge. There, half buried beneath new snow, Rook stopped. He pawed once, then again, scraping away the powder to reveal a strip of dull gray fabric stuck to a jagged rock. Liam crouched, gloved fingers brushing the edge. Industrial tape, thick, reinforced. The kind used to bind crates, not packages. It had been torn away quickly, fibers stretched and frayed. Liam let it fall back into the snow. He didn't pocket it, didn't photograph it. He noted it, fixed its position in his mind, then followed as Rook moved on. The trail crossed the frozen riverbank, where ice met earth in uneven ridges. Here, the dog's pace slowed. The scent was thinner, scattered by wind and cold. Liam saw what Rook couldn't smell. Compressed snow, faint lines cutting across drifts at a shallow angle. Tire tracks, heavy ones. They were nearly invisible unless you knew how to look, pressed flat by weight and partially erased by snowfall. Liam followed them with his eyes, noting the width, the depth, the subtle stagger that suggested a load unevenly distributed. A truck, not local, too wide. The tracks angled away from the river and toward the industrial outskirts, where old warehouses squatted like forgotten animals. Rook confirmed it with a sharp turn, nose lifting briefly before dropping again. They reached the edge of the industrial zone an hour later. The buildings here were relics. Corrugated metal walls rusted through in places, broken windows boarded up years ago and never replaced. Snow drifted against loading docks and piled in doorways no one used anymore. The silence was different here, thicker, as if the land itself remembered too much to speak. Rook led Liam to the nearest warehouse, a long, low structure with a sagging roof and a chain-link fence that had collapsed inward. Near the loading bay, the dog stopped and sniffed insistently at the ground. Liam crouched again. A small brass cylinder glinted faintly where snow had been disturbed. He brushed it free with careful fingers. A spent casing. Small caliber. Cleanly ejected. Liam closed his hand around it, then opened it again, letting the casing rest in his palm just long enough to feel its weight. This wasn't random violence. He straightened slowly, eyes sweeping the warehouse, the surrounding lots, the distant tree line. There was no movement, no sound but the faint creak of metal contracting in the cold. He backed away the way he had come, leaving the casing where it lay, forcing himself to disengage. His instincts urged him forward, toward doors, shadows, answers. But instinct without authority was just another way to make things worse. Rook sensed the shift. He glanced up, ears flicking, then returned to Liam's side without protest. At the hospital, Evan lay staring at the ceiling, the rhythmic beep of a monitor marking time. Sleep came and went in shallow waves, never staying long enough to rest. Pain dulled his thoughts, but memory pressed in regardless. A detail surfaced and refused to let go. The truck, not the whole thing, just a fragment. The rear corner as it passed under a streetlight, paint dull and dark, a plate partially obscured by grime or snow. Evan closed his eyes, forcing himself to focus. 2 letters, maybe 3. He wasn't sure which came first, only that one of them curved sharply at the bottom. An R, maybe, or a P. It wasn't much, but it was something. Another image followed, fleeting, peripheral. One of the attackers turning just enough for Evan to catch a glimpse of his jacket. Dark fabric, heavy. On the upper arm, a faint shape stitched in gray. Not a badge, not a logo he recognized. A symbol. Evan's brow furrowed. He tried to hold on to it, but the image slipped away again, leaving only the impression of something deliberate. Across the room, Mara sat upright, one hand braced against the bed as she stared at a tablet balanced on her knees. Her face was pale beneath the bruises, but her eyes were sharp, scanning line after line of archived reports. She had pulled everything she could access. Traffic complaints, patrol notes, internal memos, cross-referencing dates and locations with practiced efficiency. Patterns emerged quickly once she knew where to look. One stood out. 6 months earlier, she had flagged the river access road as a potential transit route. Not urgent, just unusual. Her recommendation to monitor the area had been acknowledged, then quietly dismissed by a senior officer she rarely interacted with. At the time, she'd assumed it was a matter of resources. Now she wasn't so sure. She zoomed in on the signature at the bottom of the digital form, jaw tightening. The handwriting was familiar, the tone polite, reasonable, final. Too final. Mara set the tablet aside and closed her eyes briefly, steadying her breath. She didn't know who to trust yet, only that someone above her had decided this area wasn't worth looking at. Outside Frosthaven, Liam stood at the edge of the industrial zone, the cold seeping through his boots. The warehouse loomed behind him, silent and empty. The pieces lined up too easily. He had seen this before. Routes hidden in plain sight, violence used not to punish but to remove obstacles. The signs were familiar enough to raise the hair on his neck. If the trail led beyond county lines, beyond state lines, then this wasn't something local law enforcement could contain. That realization sat heavy in his chest. Liam had planned to leave Frosthaven in 2 days. Head south, put miles between himself and anything that looked like a mission. He looked down at Rook, who gazed back with steady eyes, snow clinging to his whiskers. "Guess plans change," Liam said quietly. Rook's tail gave a single, firm wag. As the clouds thickened overhead and snow began to fall again, Liam turned back toward town, toward unanswered questions, toward a place he hadn't intended to stay. But some paths, once found, didn't let go. Night settled over Frosthaven with deceptive calm. Snow continued to fall, but softly now, each flake drifting down as if the town were being gently buried rather than attacked. Street lights cast pale halos over empty roads, and the frozen river reflected the glow like a strip of dull metal cutting through the darkness. Inside Liam's cabin on the outskirts of town, warmth fought its way back into the air. The fire crackled low, throwing shadows across wooden walls, scarred by time and weather. Maps lay spread across the table, printed satellite images, old industrial layouts, river access routes marked in pencil. Nothing official, nothing traceable. Liam stood over them with his arms folded, posture relaxed, but eyes sharp. This wasn't a command post, but it was close enough. Evan sat nearby on a chair he'd dragged too close to the fire, his injured shoulder stiff and bound in a medical brace. He looked thinner than before, dark hair falling into his eyes, jaw unshaven. Restless energy radiated off him, poorly contained. His foot tapped against the floor despite the pain. Mara leaned against the counter, tablet in hand. She looked composed at first glance, dark hair pulled back, movements controlled. But Liam noticed how often her grip tightened around the device. Her fear didn't show as panic. It showed as precision. They hadn't planned to meet here, but plans had a way of collapsing under pressure. Liam broke the silence. The route isn't random. He traced a finger along the map, following the frozen river north, then cutting inland toward the industrial zone. They move at night, use the ice when it's thick enough to support weight. No tire tracks on asphalt, no cameras. By the time thaw hits, everything's gone. Evan nodded grimly. We clocked the truck just after midnight. No lights, no plates we could read clearly. And no backup, Mara added quietly, because our patrol assignment was altered. That word hung heavy between them. Altered. Liam turned toward her. You're certain? Mara hesitated only a second. I pulled my original report. It doesn't match what's in the system now. Route change, timestamp adjusted. Subtle, but deliberate. Evan swore under his breath. Someone wanted us exactly where we were. And wanted you out of the way, Liam said. Rook lifted his head from the rug by the fire, ears pricking at the tension in the room. The German shepherd rose smoothly to his feet and padded toward the door, nose working the air. Liam noticed immediately. What is it, boy? Rook didn't bark. He moved to a corner near the stacked firewood, sniffed once, then began scratching at the floorboards. Mara frowned. That wasn't there earlier. Liam crossed the room and knelt, moving the wood aside. Beneath it, half hidden in the shadows, lay a small, angular object, dark green, scuffed, clearly out of place. He picked it up carefully. A GPS tracking unit, not civilian, rugged casing, encrypted port, military grade. Evan's face drained of color. That's not something locals get their hands on. Liam turned it over, expression hardening. No, that's something you acquire through contracts, or theft, or connections. The implications settled like a weight on the room. This wasn't a loose crew running contraband. This was organized, equipped, protected. Mara let out a slow breath. We can't trust everyone at the department. Evan bristled. You can't say that without proof. She met his gaze. I know, and that's what scares me. Silence followed, broken only by the fire and the faint wind outside. Evan shifted, wincing as pain flared through his shoulder. I should be out there, not sitting around while they plan their next move. Mara stepped closer. You can barely lift your arm. I can still think. I can still drive. That's not the point, she said sharply, then softened. They already tried to erase us once. Evan looked away, jaw clenched. I was behind the wheel. If I'd reacted faster. Stop, Mara said, her voice firm. This wasn't your failure. Liam watched the exchange, recognizing the pattern too well. Guilt. It drove people into bad decisions faster than fear ever could. He placed the tracker on the table. You both stay alive. That's the priority. Mara nodded slowly. That's why I need to check something. She set the tablet down and tapped through a secure interface, fingers moving with practiced ease. I keep encrypted backups of my case files, off-network. If anything happens to me, the data triggers an automated release to multiple external addresses. Evan stared at her. You never told me that. I didn't want anyone to know, she said quietly. Including you. Liam respected that. She continued. I checked the logs. No breach, no access. If they silence us, the information doesn't disappear. That makes you dangerous, Liam said. Mara's mouth tightened. I know. Rook let out a low, uneasy sound, tail stiff. The dog moved back toward the door, pacing once before stopping. Liam followed his gaze to the window. Snowfall had thickened again, but beyond it, far off near the industrial zone, a pair of lights flickered briefly, then vanished. A truck. Evan saw it too. They're moving. Mara's pulse quickened. This late in the season. Last run, Liam said, before the thaw. They exchanged looks, understanding dawning simultaneously. If the shipment moved now, it meant loose ends would be tied up just as quickly. Evan swallowed. That includes us. Mara nodded. We're liabilities. Liam straightened, decision settling into place. Then we prepare. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't on duty, but he knew patterns, timing, and how operations closed ranks when exposed, and he knew this wasn't over. Outside, Frosthaven slept, unaware that beneath its snow-covered calm, something dark was shifting, something ready to move and ready to kill, to protect what remained hidden. The night broke without warning. Snow still clung to Frosthaven in thick, unmoving layers, but the sky above the frozen river had lightened just enough to reveal shapes. Trees like black ribs, the steel bridge a dark scar against the pale horizon. Dawn was close, though the sun itself had not yet risen. The attack came before it could. A low rumble echoed across the ice, too controlled to be weather, too deliberate to be chance. Liam heard it first. Rook's head snapped up a heartbeat later, ears locked forward, body coiling tight as a drawn wire. Now, Liam said quietly. Evan and Mara were already moving. They hadn't stayed in one place. Liam had insisted on it. No predictable patterns, no comfort of walls. The riverbank gave visibility, but it also offered danger. Ice reflected light. Sound carried. Headlights flared briefly at the far end of the embankment, then cut out. Figures spilled from the darkness. 3, no, 4. They moved fast and low, rifles held tight to their bodies, winter gear stripped of reflective patches. Faces masked, professionals. They're not here to scare us, Evan muttered, breath fogging in the cold. They're here to erase. Liam didn't answer. He was already shifting position, guiding them with sharp hand signals. Left, down, spread. The frozen river became a chessboard in seconds. The first shots cracked the silence. Snow exploded where Evan had stood moments earlier. He dove hard, shoulder screaming in protest, as he slid behind a slab of ice pushed up from the river's edge. Mara rolled the opposite direction, coming up on one knee, weapon steady despite the tremor in her hands. Fear burned hot in her chest, but she didn't freeze. She never had. Liam moved through the chaos like a shadow, every step calculated. He didn't fire immediately. He waited, watched, counted breaths. A shape rushed the right flank. Too aggressive, too eager. Rook answered first. The German shepherd burst from cover with a deep, thunderous snarl, hitting the attacker mid-stride. The man went down hard, weapon skidding across the ice as Rook clamped onto his arm and twisted, weight and momentum doing what brute force never could alone. Liam was there a second later, knee driving into the man's shoulder, wrenching the rifle free and sending it spinning away. He didn't linger. He dragged Rook back with a sharp command and vanished again into the white haze. Two attackers shifted, trying to flank. Mara saw it and shouted a warning, but the sound was swallowed by wind and gunfire. Liam threw a chunk of packed ice, hard and precise. It shattered against a rock, drawing one attacker's attention just long enough. Liam closed the distance and struck from the blind side, using leverage and speed rather than strength. The man crumpled, breath knocked clean out of him. Evan fired once, controlled, driving the last attacker back toward the river. The world narrowed to movement and noise. Breath burned, muscles screamed. Then Mara's tablet vibrated violently against her chest. She froze for half a second, heart slamming. The backup system, triggered, something, or someone had tripped the failsafe. Her files were gone, not deleted, released. She knew it instinctively, relief and terror crashing together. The data she had hidden, encrypted and layered, had left Frosthaven's systems entirely. It was no longer theirs to bury. "Liam," she shouted, "it's out. The data's out." He didn't ask where. He didn't need to. The remaining attacker realized it too. Panic crept into his movements, discipline cracking. He broke and ran. That was when the sirens came. Not local, different cadence, heavier engines. From the road beyond the trees, dark vehicles pushed through the snow. Unmarked, aggressive, purposeful. Blue lights cut through the dawn, reflecting off ice and steel. Federal. They didn't rush in blind. They fanned out, weapons up, voices sharp and controlled. Commands echoed across the riverbank. The last attacker dropped to his knees, hands raised, breath coming in ragged bursts. More figures emerged near the industrial zone, caught mid-movement by the sudden wall of authority closing in. There was no escape left to them now. Evan sagged against the ice, exhaustion finally winning. He laughed once, breathless and disbelieving. "Guess we weren't wrong," he said. Mara didn't answer. She stood very still, watching as agents secured the scene, cataloged weapons, and pulled masked faces into the light. Among them was a man she recognized instantly. A senior officer, someone who had smiled at her in hallways and signed off on reports without reading them. The betrayal hit harder than any blow, but it didn't break her. Hours later, the sun finally crested the horizon. Frosthaven lay quiet again, snow untouched where violence had passed through it. The frozen river glowed faintly gold beneath the rising light. The operation was over, the network dismantled, the routes exposed, the evidence irrefutable. Evan and Mara stood side by side as statements were taken, their shoulders squared, eyes clearer than they had been days ago. They looked older, not worn, but steadier. Liam declined every attempt at acknowledgement. No names, no reports, no photographs. By the time the town fully woke, he and Rook were already gone. They moved south along the river as the day warmed, leaving Frosthaven behind. Snow still covered the ground. Winter hadn't loosened its grip, but something had shifted. The town would sleep safer now, not because of heroes, but because a few people had chosen not to turn away when others fell in the cold. In everyday life, courage rarely looks like a spotlight moment. Most of the time, it appears quietly. When someone chooses to stay instead of walking away, to speak up instead of staying safe, to protect others even when there is no reward waiting. Not everyone wears a uniform. Not every battle makes the news. But the choice to stand for what is right, especially when the cost is real, is what truly changes the world. This story is a reminder that darkness doesn't disappear on its own. It fades when ordinary people refuse to look the other way. When loyalty, responsibility, and compassion guide our actions, even the coldest seasons can give way to light. If this story moved you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need encouragement today. Let us know in the comments what part stayed with you the most, or if you've ever faced a moment where you had to choose between comfort and doing the right thing. And if you believe in stories that honor courage, loyalty, and the bonds that protect us all, don't forget to subscribe for more.